The date is July 1965. A transport plane lands at Tan Son Nhut Air Base, and a team of 30 New Zealand soldiers steps onto the sweltering tarmac. They are the vanguard of their nation's commitment, a small advisory group attached to the Australian forces. Among them are men of Maori descent, whose warrior lineage stretched back centuries before the first European ever sighted Aotearoa. To the Americans at the base, they were barely a footnote. A nation of under 3 million was sending a token force to a war-devouring entire U.S. divisions. What possible difference could they make? The answer would unfold in the years to come. New Zealand's presence would swell to include artillery batteries, infantry companies integrated with the Australians at Nui Dat, and elite special air service operators. At its peak, 550 Kiwis served in Vietnam. Throughout the conflict, some 3,900 would rotate through. 37 would never return, and 187 would be wounded. But these statistics only scratched the surface. What truly set the New Zealanders apart wasn't merely their combat skill or their seamless ANZAC partnership. It was something far more ancient, something that would make U.S. Marines stare in disbelief and silence hardened Australian diggers. It was a living bridge connecting a modern helicopter war to traditions forged over 1,000 years. The Maori soldiers had brought their culture with them, and that culture was, at its very core, engineered for war. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you joining us from? Drop a comment with your city and country. It's always incredible to see our global community come together for these stories. Now, grab a drink and let's begin. To grasp what stunned the Americans in Vietnam, you must first understand the Haka. It is not merely a war dance. That is a simplistic Western label for a profound cultural practice. The Haka is a ceremonial display of rhythmic movement, thunderous stamping, and powerful chanting. It serves many purposes: to welcome, to honor the dead, to celebrate, to challenge. But in its martial form, the Peru, it was a weapon, psychological warfare, perfected over centuries. The Maori people are descended from Polynesian voyagers who reached Aotearoa, New Zealand, around the 13th century. They established a warrior culture of sophisticated, ritualized combat. Before battle, warriors performed the Haka with a triple purpose: to unify the war party, to invoke the spiritual protection of their ancestors, and to terrify the enemy. Imagine facing a line of warriors, their faces contorted, eyes bulging, voices thundering in unison, a sight designed to paralyze an opponent with fear. This was the ancient power about to be unleashed in a modern war. New Zealand's entry into Vietnam was a cautious political decision, driven by Cold War alliance obligations. While Australia committed quickly, New Zealand hesitated. Its entire army was small, and the commitment would be symbolic. However, the need to support the U.S.-led effort outweighed the reluctance. The first deployment was an artillery battery in 1965, which later grew to include infantry companies. The soldiers who deployed were professionals, many with experience from the Malayan emergency. Crucially, a significant number were Maori, continuing a strong tradition of military service. This legacy was forged by the legendary 28th Māori Battalion of World War II. This segregated unit, composed entirely of Maori volunteers, silenced critics with its extraordinary combat record in North Africa and Italy. German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel reportedly called them the finest infantrymen he had ever encountered. What truly set the 28th Battalion apart was its culture. They performed the Haka before battle, at funerals, and during ceremonies, fully integrating their traditions into military life. This was not tolerated folklore. It was an institutionalized part of their identity. The Maori soldiers arriving in Vietnam 2 decades later were the direct inheritors of this powerful legacy. In Vietnam, the New Zealand infantry companies Victor and Whiskey were based with the 1st Australian Task Force at Nui Dat in Phu Thai Province. They lived in sandbag hooches, patrolled dense jungles and rubber plantations, and faced the constant threat of Viet Cong ambushes. It was within this harsh environment that they maintained their customs. The first time Australian diggers witnessed a Haka at Nui Dat, The effect was electric. Men who were their comrades in arms, who shared their rations and risks, were suddenly transformed. Their stomping feet churned the red Vietnamese soil, their unified voices rising in a primal chant that was felt deep in the chest. Word of this powerful spectacle spread quickly. There is no official record of the first American encounter with the Haka, but it occurred during joint operations at shared fire bases. Picture the scene. Late 1967, a ceremony for fallen soldiers or a unit rotation. The New Zealanders form up. The Maori soldiers step forward. Then begins the synchronized stomping, chest slapping, and the roaring chant, with fierce facial expressions, pukana, dilated eyes, and wetero, protruding tongues. For American soldiers, raised on a doctrine of stoic professionalism and formal ceremonies, this display of controlled ferocity was shocking. It was a raw, ancient warrior spirit transplanted into a war of helicopters and M16s. Reactions ranged from stunned silence to spontaneous applause. They were witnessing a living tradition that connected these modern soldiers to a battle-hardened past. The Haka was part of a broader cultural framework. The wero, a challenge ritual performed with a taiaha, a fighting staff, was used to welcome dignitaries. The karana, a traditional call of welcome, was incorporated into ceremonies. At memorials, the Haka became a solemn, powerful outlet for grief, allowing soldiers a physical and communal way to process loss that standard military funerals could not provide. The power of the Haka is both psychological and physiological. For the performers, the deep rhythmic breathing and synchronized movements create a state of peak arousal, releasing adrenaline and building a powerful group focus. For witnesses, it triggers a deep-seated evolutionary response to coordinated aggression. It is instinctively threatening and awe-inspiring. These were not ceremonial troops. They were combat infantrymen. They fought in major operations like the response to the Tet Offensive. Their culture did not make them invulnerable, but it gave them a unique resilience. After intense firefights, the rituals provided a structured way to confront trauma, a form of psychological debriefing centuries ahead of its time. This was never more evident than in the aftermath of the Battle of Long Tan in 1966, where 108 Australians, supported by New Zealand artillery, fought off a force of 2,000. When the survivors returned, Maori soldiers performed the Haka in honor of the fallen. For the Australians accustomed to stoic silence, this raw, physical expression of shared grief and respect was profoundly moving, strengthening the ANZAC bond immeasurably. By 1968, the reputation of the New Zealanders' traditions had spread. Visiting American generals like Brigadier General William Grubb requested to see the Haka, acknowledging its unique power. While the performances were never for mere entertainment, their impact was undeniable. The Maori soldiers of Vietnam had demonstrated that ancient warrior culture was not a relic of the past, but a living force that could resonate powerfully on a modern battlefield. New Zealand's war in Vietnam ended in December 1972. The last combat troops withdrew, closing a 7-year chapter. The statistics were stark but modest. 37 killed, 187 wounded. While a fraction of the colossal American and Australian tolls, for a nation of under 3 million, each loss was a profound wound, felt with particular depth in the tight-knit Maori communities. The very traditions that had armored the soldiers in combat now served to heal them in grief. Fallen soldiers were welcomed home onto Maori traditional meeting grounds, in ceremonies predating European arrival. The Tangi Hanga, the Maori funeral rite, allowed for days of communal mourning, where grief was shared and processed collectively, not shouldered alone. For the Maori veterans returning home, this cultural framework was a lifeline. While they still battled the invisible wounds of war, PTSD, adjustment struggles, the same demons that haunted all veterans, they were not cast adrift. Their community and its ancient protocols provided a structure to reintegrate their harrowing experiences into a collective narrative. This was not a cure, but a compass in the fog of trauma. The Haka performed at reunions and memorials in the decades that followed now carried the echoes of Vietnam. The red dirt of Nui Dat, the monsoons, the faces of friends left behind. The legacy of this cultural fusion did not fade. It became institutional. Today, the New Zealand Defence Force formally incorporates Te Maori, Maori customs, into its very fabric. New recruits learn the Haka. The Wero Challenge, Karanakal, and Haka are standard protocol at official ceremonies, guided by cultural advisors. This is not tokenism. It is a fundamental recognition that cultural identity is a component of combat effectiveness, a lesson written in the blood of the 28th Māori Battalion and reaffirmed in Vietnam. Allied militaries took note. The United States Marine Corps, with its own warrior ethos, studied the New Zealand model. Special operations units analyzed the Haka's psychological impact. By the 21st century, as New Zealand troops deployed to Afghanistan, new generations of coalition partners in Kandahar and Kabul witnessed the same powerful ritual, their reactions a familiar mix of awe and visceral respect. The warriors of the South Pacific had proven that ancient traditions are not relics, but tools that grow sharper with use. This stood in stark contrast to the American military machine in Vietnam, which was engineered for uniformity, often suppressing individual and cultural identity to create interchangeable components. While practical for a massive conscript army, this process severed the vital link between warrior spirit and cultural heritage, a connection the Maori soldiers embodied completely. It would take decades for the U.S. military to begin formally recognizing the value of this connection, slowly embracing the traditions of its own Native American warriors. The New Zealand example provided a powerful, proven blueprint. A professional, effective military could seamlessly integrate indigenous warrior traditions, and in doing so, become stronger. The Haka was not a distraction from readiness. It was a catalyst for it. The American soldiers who witnessed the Haka in the fire bases and jungles carried that memory home. Some became senior officers and policymakers. All had been shown irrefutable proof that there was more than one way to build a warrior, a lesson never found in their training manuals. This legacy lives on every ANZAC Day. As the sun rises on April 25th, New Zealand veterans, now in their 70s and 80s, gather at dawn services. They watch a new generation, their grandsons and granddaughters in uniform, perform the Haka with the same ferocity and precision. The words and movements are unchanged, only the faces are new. At international veterans reunions, the request still comes, "Can you do the Haka?" And the old soldiers oblige. Though their bodies are less agile, the intensity in their eyes is undimmed. The purpose remains. The connection to something far greater than any single war or soldier endures. What the Americans witnessed in Vietnam was not merely an exotic custom. It was evidence of a living bridge between a modern soldier and his ancient ancestry. The Maori who fought there were professionals of the highest order, masters of artillery and aerial assault. Yet, they also carried their ancestors into battle with them, their spirit channeled through chants and movements passed down over 1,000 years. They showed the world something unforgettable. War changes everything. Culture endures.